Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm not quite sure how, but it's still only Tuesday, the 24th of June. It feels like a Friday already. You join me and the magnificent Michael Brown for the morning blast, where myself and Michael will be jumpstarting your trading day with a preview of the day, a review of yesterday, maybe a chuckle, maybe a bit of value added. Who knows? Maybe I don't know, chatting about the pub. Fuck knows at this point. Although I could do with a pint. But before we do, I'll get the legals out the way. So nothing discussed in this space session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Mr. Michael Brown. How are you?
Good morning to you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. I must admit, you sound rather more chirpy than I expected, given I was just reading about you coming down with plague-like symptoms.
Well, I say plague like yeah, I just didn't have any sleep and I just can't seem to get my body temperature down. I'm just hot, hot, hot.
Oh, diddums.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
there a violin sound effect on here somewhere?
There might be one somewhere, but yeah, I'll take it. But I press on. I'm going into town today. I've got some people to see, business to do.
What a trooper you are.
Can't stop, won't stop. But enough about me. Shall I get some Iranian headlines out of the way? Get people up to date on
Yeah,
that.
why not? Because I'm fed up with it. And the
Yeah,
usual suspects have ended up with egg all over their faces again, and
yeah.
that's good enough for me.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So just as usual, just as we are doing at the moment, we'll get the Iranian headlines out the way from the always awesome overnight news roundup, which Zach puts together when it's up on our Substack, mainly because it kind of leads into everything that's about to be said afterwards. So unless you've been living under a rock, you should be aware that a ceasefire has been put together by the magnificent Donald Trump. Let's be honest, if it was anyone else, people would be calling for a Nobel Peace Prize, but they won't. But more importantly, just before the ceasefire, there was a barrage of missiles flown over by Iran, but it appears that this has been taken by the Israelis as before the ceasefire cutoff, which is crucial. But Israeli emergency responders are reporting that 4 were killed in the Iranian missile attack early Tuesday. 4 people were killed in the Iranian missile attack on Israel, despite President Trump's initial claims of ceasefire agreement, highlighting the ongoing volatility. But as I said, we've had Netanyahu come out and confirm the ceasefire with Iran, vowing strong response to violations, and he didn't pick up on the barrages that happened before that. So we're taking that as, at the moment, Israel were happy that Iran followed the agreed timeline. Iran's foreign minister signals willingness to stop fighting. Tehran's foreign minister stated that Iran would halt hostilities if Israel ceases attacks, offering a path to de-escalation amid heightened tensions. And we said this yesterday. Iran are always desperate to keep the off-ramp open, and that's what we saw. Trump urges adherence to the ceasefire in Trump's social. He even said please, which is nice. US warns of cyber attack risk linked to the Iran conflict. US regulators have urged companies to bolster cyber security, citing increased risks of cyber attacks tied to the Iran-Israel conflict, a critical concern for global markets. Now, it's important to note, again, everyone should be probably aware of this already, but in case you're not, Iran's response to this surgical strike by the US was simply to fire some missiles at a deserted airbase in Qatar, which they also gave hours of notice to both Qatar and the US that they were going to do. And me and Michael are completely on the same hymn sheet this on here, because I posted my opinion of it, and then I saw that he'd already posted his opinion, and they were exactly the same. The reason why crude shanked is because it just kind of proved that their response had nothing to do with wanting to close the Strait of Hormuz. So everyone that was calling for the Strait of Hormuz to be closed, people saying it was huge news that the Parliament had voted for it, you know who you are. Me and Michael Brown know who you are, because I saw we both replied to the same post about that. That shows how in sync we are. As Michael said at the start of the show,
Worryingly.
egg on your face. It's risk on, baby, risk on.
Yeah, and actually, just on that, just to jump in there, I mean,
Go on. Well, I'm done.
plenty of people have made complete and utter cocks of themselves over the last 24 hours or so. People who are
I think that's being
supposedly,
polite.
well, this is a family show-ish. People who are supposed to be experts in this sort of thing clearly are not. Fundamentally, it boils down to the US got their airstrikes on targets that they've wanted to destroy for quite a while.
Yeah.
Israel got the same thing, and the Iranians got some fairly fancy and good-looking clips for their propaganda 10 o'clock news broadcasts. So, frankly, everyone's a winner at this point.
Well, this is
That's
it.
basically the way to view it, I
Well,
think.
yeah, no, exactly that. And like, I think you're right about the US wanted to bomb what they've been looking to bomb for ages, because the bombs they used were actually designed with Fordo in mind. And so they finally got to test them, basically. But yeah, no, completely. And like you said, as we said yesterday, show, and I said with Angie, hello Angie, good morning, on the
Well,
grain
it's early.
blast, yeah, on the grain blast, that, the regime will do any, push come to shove, the regime will do whatever they can to stay in power. And if that means kind of just going holding their hands up and saying, okay, right, it's a fair cop, Gov, well, we'll back away, they'll do that, because that is their red line. They do not want to give up power, and that's exactly what we've seen. But there is more to life than what's happened in Iran. So go on, kick off.
Indeed, and with any luck, we can return to our normal format tomorrow, as I think we can probably draw a line under
Well, let's hope
geopolitical
so.
risk for the time being. As you say, there is more to life than what's going on in the Middle East, and I'll start with the Fed this morning, actually, because we heard from Fed
Ooh.
Governor Mickey Bowman yesterday, the Vice Chair for Supervision, who said that she would be in favour of a
Oh, hang
July
on.
rate.
Sorry, one sec.
Oh,
One
go
sec.
on.
Breaking news. Israeli military says it identified missiles launched from Iran towards Israel. Israeli military says defensive systems are operating to intercept the threat, and public is instructed to enter protected space and remain there until further notice. So we had a good run. Fucking hell. Right. Anyway, sorry. Back to the Fed. Fucking Iran, you bastards.
Oh, that won't lead to an escalation. Famous last words. Where was I in terms of the Fed? Yeah, Bowman yesterday coming out saying that she would support a rate cut in July if inflation remains subdued, and that they can cut if inflation continues lower or the labour market weakens, with the Fed having not seen a significant impact from tariffs. This is really, I'm going to swear now, but this is really starting to fuck me off at this point.
Yes.
Because Christopher Waller on Friday, he wants the chair's job. He was appointed by Trump back in 2017. He wants Powell's job next year, so he comes out with a load of dovish nonsense on CNBC. Bowman has just got a promotion from President Trump, because she was promoted to the vice chair for supervision role back in March. This is the first time she has made any public comments since that promotion. And of course, you've got to remember that for the last sort of 24 months or so, Bowman has been by far and away the most hawkish member of the FOMC. All of a sudden, she gets a better job, and she's an uber dove who wants to lower rates massively and lower them in size. Now, I don't want to get all sort of tinfoil hat here, but it does feel a bit like there's some quid pro quo arrangements going on in the background here, along the lines of, I'll give you a better job if you become dovish and if you push for rate cuts from inside the Fed. And in fact, that speaks to a rant that President Trump has had on Truth Social this morning, alluding to Chair Powell's appearance on Capitol Hill later on today. And he was actually saying, again, calling for rate cuts, which is quite frankly nonsense. But one of the things that he did say in this Truth rant was, and I quote, the board should activate. Now, I don't know what he means by activate, whether he means that the board should somehow carry out a coup and try and
Well,
depose Fed Chair Powell.
do you know what I'm picturing? I'm picturing the FOMC dressed up as Power Rangers.
Well, it'll be like one of those emerging market countries where you get some sort of general giving the Fed press conference in July at this
Yes,
point.
load of medals.
Yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. And, to be completely honest, I think Bowman and Waller have both let themselves down, because what they're doing is utterly shameless. And frankly, it just continues to erode the institutional credibility of the Fed, or what's left of it at this point. But I think also in terms of the Trump side of things, I mean, it just shows that I think in my mind Trump's given up. Him and Bessent came in saying we're going to take the tough decisions, we're going to try and get the deficit down, we're going to restore the US to a more sustainable fiscal path. Well, you're not, because Doge is now not a thing. You're about to pass a bill in Congress that is going to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. And you've resorted to just trying to bully the Fed into lowering rates because you don't want to take the tough decisions that are necessary in order to right the ship on a fiscal front in the United States. And I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned this yesterday, but what the administration don't seem to have realised is that, let's say the Fed cut rates right now, today, and they delivered that 250 basis points worth of easing that Trump is so
Mighty
desperate for.
Morphin Fed officials.
If Powell just turns around and goes, fuck it, can't be bothered anymore, have your rate cut. To be clear, this isn't going to happen, but if it did, the 10-year yield is going to hit probably 6, maybe 7% by the time he's finished his press conference. And good luck saving your $800 billion a year on debt interest then. Trump clearly has not worked out how fixed income markets work. And someone, somewhere, very quickly, I think needs to give him a tap on the shoulder and tell him to wise up. Because now that...
You!
Well, quite. Because certainly now that the whole geopolitical shenanigans appear to be in the rearview mirror, I think this is going to refocus market participants' attention on the credibility of institutions in the United States. It's certainly not going to help with the capital outflows that we've seen out of US assets and out of the dollar. So while Europe is not exactly a bastion of stability at this moment in time, I wouldn't be surprised if the euro continues to attract some inflows. Anyway, rant over on that front, although I'm sure I'll have more to say on that at some point relatively soon. Other headlines from yesterday, a couple of bits on the trade front. Kevin Hassett, the NEC director, saying that Scott Bessent and Jameson Greer are in constant contact with China. Good for them, I guess. Scott Bessent, of course, said last week that there was going to be another meeting with China in about 3 weeks. Well, that timeline is now a week and a half away, and we still don't have a date or a time or a venue, so we'll see what happens there. We also had reports in the Indian press that India and the United States are trying to finalise an interim trade deal by the 9th of July. The obvious takeaway here is, well, isn't everyone trying to do that? But I suppose the key word in that headline was interim, because it suggests that they have acknowledged that a full and comprehensive trade agreement will not be reached in, the space of a fortnight. In terms of other notable developments from yesterday, obviously, as Ryan alluded to, it was a risk-on day across the board. Equities rallying strongly, and we've seen futures extend on those gains in early trade this morning. Crude barreling lower. Brent and WTI down about 7% yesterday, down as much as 5% in early trade this morning, and Treasuries rallying across the curve as well. A couple of factors giving Treasuries a bit of a helping hand. Obviously, that dovish Fed speak, but also lower inflation expectations as a result of the fall that we have seen in crude prices. In terms of data, yesterday it was PMI day, of course, although of course all overshadowed by what was going on in the Middle East. In terms of Europe, the pace of output remained unchanged in June compared to where it was in the month of May, with the composite output gauge holding steady at 50.2. Here in the UK, though, we did see that composite output gauge rise to a 3-month high at 50.7, which is hardly incredible, but nonetheless, it is an increase. Yeah, absolutely. We'll take anything we get given these days. Although it is worth bearing in mind that in the services sector in particular, the employment fell for the 9th straight month. And according to S&P Global, the pace of job shedding actually increased compared to where it was in May. Now, that's a particular concern because you recall, of course, that about 109,000 people fell off HMRC payrolls in the month of May. That was the biggest fall in employment since the pandemic. If the pace has even quickened from that, of course, the two aren't directly comparable, but they're close enough. If the pace has quickened from that, then that is very, very worrying indeed.
And the thing is, this does tie in with the service industry, kind of restaurants and whatnot were up in arms when Reeves pulled the PAYE. The national insurance contribution. When they flicked that to be more paid by the employer, it was the service industry that, to be fair, came out straight away and said this is going to be devastating for us. And it appears that that's exactly what we're seeing.
Yes, absolutely agree with that one. And last, but by no means least, he is on the call. Our AI correspondent, Tom Talks Cars. He resolutely told us in January that this would not happen.
Oh
But
no.
Reuters
Oh no.
sources reporting yesterday that
He's going to be
DeepSeek, which is
livid.
of course he is, isn't he? DeepSeek, that cheap AI out of China. Well, funnily enough, they're colluding with the Chinese government and the Chinese military. They are passing various bits of user information and statistics to Beijing's surveillance apparatus, that via Reuters citing US
Colour me
officials.
shocked.
Apparently, DeepSeek have also, again, shockingly, used shell companies to access some of the higher end chips that supposedly they didn't have access to because they were saying they built it all on very cheap technology. Well, again, that was complete and utter nonsense. So whoever could have foreseen this one coming, something out of China working for the CCP? Well, I never. You could knock me down with a feather.
Exactly that, exactly that. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Michael Brown. Before we go back to you, I will read out some of the choice headlines from Zach's overnight news roundup. Again, as usual, follow Zach. You can see him listening in and also subscribe to the Substack. Before I do, though, we've already had the Israeli finance minister responding to this Iranian missile attack, breaking the ceasefire. And I quote, Tehran will shake. Unquote. So it looks like we are going to see some escalation on the back of this. But anyway, moving on. Trade news. Japan's tariff negotiator plans US visit to end the harmful tariffs. Japan's Akazawa will visit the US as early as June 26th for his 7th trip, racking up some air miles, aiming to eliminate tariffs hurting Japan's economy, signaling the urgent trade talks. We know for a fact that they're going to be focused on autos, etc. China's ports hit record activity as exporters rush ahead of US tariffs. No surprise there. Chinese ports recorded their busiest week ever as exporters rush shipments to the US to beat potential tariffs expected next month, impacting global trade flows. That's according to Bloomberg. South Korea, they're seeking exemption from US tariffs on cars and steel. South Korea's trade minister Yo Han-koo pushed for exemptions from US tariffs on cars and steel following initial discussions with US officials, a key issue for its economy. In macro news, Trump criticised Fed Chair Powell. Nothing new there. Michael spoke about this just now. President attacked.
Don't get me started on that one again.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, as Michael said, Trump's arguing that rates should be 2 to 3 points lower, suggesting hikes if the economy worsens. Yeah, someone needs to have a word with him. The Senate Republicans warm to 40,000 SALT cap in Trump's tax package. Senate Republicans near an agreement on a $40,000 state and local tax deduction cap in Trump's tax plan, but seek a lower income threshold, a critical negotiation point. That's according to Bloomberg. Moving to China, China's coal glut leads to surge in exports. China's coal exports surged 13% in the first 5 months of 2025 due to a domestic surplus, reshaping global energy markets as unwanted cargoes flood abroad. Moving to France, their retirement reform talks collapse. Colour me shocked with France
What a
there.
surprise.
Risking government stability. Again, colour me shocked. Deadlocked talks over France's pension reforms increase the likelihood of a no confidence vote. Well, it's been about 6 months since we had the last one.
I
Go
was
on.
going to say, when is there's a sort of, not a truce effectively, but a blockade on the French can only have a legislative election once every 12 months. I can't remember when that 12-month period is due to expire, but I believe it's sometime this summer. So
Well, there you
maybe
go.
new elections.
One for Zach to WhatsApp us on. There you
Yeah,
go.
come on, Zach, hurry up.
Hurry up. ECB.
Run along.
Villeroy signals rate cuts despite oil volatility. ECB official Villeroy suggests the ECB could cut rates despite oil market fluctuations, prioritising economic growth in uncertain times.
Well, given the crude's about $10 a barrel lower than when he said that.
Well, exactly. South Korea's consumer confidence hits 4-year high. South Korea's consumer confidence reached a 4-year peak, driven by political stability, fiscal stimulus, and optimism for pro-growth policies under his new leadership. And finally, on the macro front, China targets a unified national power trading market by year end. Zach's just WhatsApped me and told me to do one. But anyway, China's main
Oh,
electricity grid operator announced plans to launch a unified national power trading market by December 2025, a move to boost energy efficiency and economic stability. Geopolitics other than Iran. China accuses Taiwan's president of heresy over sovereignty claims. China labeled Taiwan president claims that Taiwan is a country as heresy and provocation, escalating cross-strait tensions with potential global ramifications. In the UK Starmer commits to a 5% GDP on security by 2035. We mentioned this yesterday, but it's going to be on the back of a bit of a elaborate or creative accounting. Well, I hope so, because
well,
otherwise our tax is going up.
that may be a bit of clever headline writing, but it feels interesting that they've called that on security and not on
Yeah,
defence, because
yeah.
you can call anything security if you want it to. Food security is one thing,
Well,
for
yeah,
example.
exactly. Well, they have said it's to meet NATO's 5% GDP security spending, so I think it just might be the wording there, because we know NATO are looking for defence. Japan, they've reappointed the top FX diplomat for US tariff talks. They reappointed Mamura as its top foreign exchange diplomat, solidifying his role in the ongoing tariff negotiations, a strategic move to protect economic interests. And finally, before I hand back to you, in equities, Amazon to invest 54 billion in the UK for AI and innovation. Nvidia CEO begins stock sales under an $865 million plan. UK antitrust targets Google's search dominance, where it had been a few weeks before, since the last time Google were called up in terms of antitrust, so we were probably due. Foxconn, their AI server orders extend to 2027. Foxconn reported AI server demand outpaces capacity of orders secured through 2027, underscoring sustained AI boom's impact on tech supply chains. Asian tech stocks, they're poised for a 15 to 20% rally. That's gone to JP Morgan. Finally, for me, Wolfspeed signs a $4.6 billion debt restructuring deal. US semiconductor supplier Wolfspeed agreed to cut $4.6 billion in debt through a bankruptcy filing, a major restructuring to stabilize its role in the chip industry. That's gone to Wall Street Journal. And that's it from me. Back to you in the studio.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Well, in
You're
terms
welcome.
of today, then, not only are we poised for what is likely to be a very interesting final day in the cricket, we also have plenty on the economic docket as well. In about 8 minutes' time, at the top of the hour, we have the latest IFO sentiment surveys out of Germany. The headline business climate metric that is seen rising to 88, up from a prior 87.5 in the month of May. As for other data releases today, we get inflation figures out of Canada at 1:30. CPI expected unchanged at 1.7% on a year-on-year basis in May. Money markets pricing about a 4 in 10 chance of a July cut from the Bank of Canada, so potential for a bit of a dovish repricing if that print comes in a little bit softer than expected. And then at 3:00 this afternoon, we have the latest Richmond Fed manufacturing figures, and we also get consumer confidence out of the US as well. The Conference Board's gauge that is seen rising to 99.8 in June, up from a prior 98. In terms of other notable things to consider today at 6:00 this evening London time, we have a 2-year Treasury auction, $69 billion being sold off. That comes ahead of a 5-year sale tomorrow and a 7-year sale on Thursday. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, Fed Chair Powell heads to Capitol Hill for 2 days of congressional testimony. This testimony is due to start at 3 p.m. London time, although there have been occasions in the past where the text of Powell's initial remarks has been released about 90 minutes before. So do just be aware of that possibility. Fundamentally, though, Powell will probably just stick to the script that he outlined at the press conference last week, noting that policy is well positioned and that the Fed are in no hurry to make any adjustments to the Fed fund rate. Plenty of other Fed speakers as well today, including Barr, Collins, Kashkari, Williams and Hammack. Of course, all this talk about a July cut seems to be running away with itself, but I can't imagine many are going to be overly keen to endorse that message. Also on the speaking front today, we're due to hear from the ECB chief economist, Philip Lane. He is actually speaking twice. We are also due to hear from the ECB's Casimir as today progresses. And in terms of the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey. He'll be speaking a couple of times, as well as 4 of his colleagues. And last, but by no means least, we have a couple of earnings due today before the market open. We hear from Carnival Cruises. Hopefully they don't capsize. And after the market close, we will see whether or not FedEx are able to deliver.
Don't. Oh, God. Well, on that
And
note,
that's all from me.
good. Michael, thank you so much as always, listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. Yada, yada, yada. I'm off to the pub. See you suckers later. Much love. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye for now.